Hey guys, and welcome back for today's video where we just got a brand new national poll out from Emerson. You guys might remember the prior Emerson poll. We actually had a tie in first place between Biden and Sanders. Now, if you want to take a look at all of this polling data from this poll for yourself, I'll link it down at the bottom of the video description. Now, we are seeing a little bit of movement in the numbers, specifically more so with Biden on the positive end and Warren on the negative end. But you can get these shifting around in national polls with relatively small sample sizes, so that could be part of it. But nonetheless, I think these are trends that we are seeing in a lot of these polls, and specifically more so with Warren and her taking a step back. So the sample size here is 525 individuals for this Democratic primary, and that's a plus or minus margin of error of 4.2 percentage points. Biden was able to gain 5 points from the last Emerson poll, where he's up into first place by himself at 32%. Sanders pretty similar to his prior Emerson numbers, receding a couple of points back to 25%. Now there's quite a significant gap now between Biden and Sanders and the rest of the field, because in the prior result, we had Warren at 20%, and this one she's only at 12%. So she had the largest differential in her numbers from the prior result, losing 8 percentage points. The rest of the field all in single digits, Buttigieg at 8%. Also a little bit more strength here from Yang as well as Gabbard compared to what their average national polls are saying, where Yang's at 6%, Gabbard's at 4%. Then you have Bloomberg at 3%, Klobuchar, Booker, and Steyer each at 2 percentage points, John Delaney at 1%, and everyone else is at 0%. Now I want to talk a little bit more about Elizabeth Warren, and also just the fact that we might be heading towards a situation where it turns into a Biden versus Sanders matchup at the top of this race, kind of a replay of what we had in 2016 when it was the establishment-friendly Democrat Hillary Clinton running against the progressive outsider Bernie Sanders. In this instance, Biden is taking the mantle of Hillary Clinton, and Sanders is, of course, playing the role of himself. But Elizabeth Warren's situation is fascinating, and I just want to elaborate on it a little bit. So throughout this entire process, very early on, you had Elizabeth Warren. People were pretty skeptical about her running. She had that Native American ancestry controversy around her campaign very early on. So people were pretty skeptical with her. And there was also a ton of other people running that were also fairly well known in the Democratic circles. Now, Warren in those instances was polling in single digits. Now, where was she able to find success where a lot of those other individuals simply weren't able to find success, like a Beto O'Rourke and a Cory Booker and a Kamala Harris and a Kirsten Gillibrand? Warren separated herself from that pack and was able to actually peak in October, where she was able, in the average of the national polls, where she was right about even or a little bit above where Joe Biden was. Now, what led up to that? It was month after month of releasing progressive policy initiatives that answered a lot of questions and would have helped a lot of people that were in the Democratic electorate. They liked what they were hearing consistently about the fact that Elizabeth Warren had a plan for the problems that they have in their lives. Also, Warren was doing pretty well in the debates early on and positioning herself more in the lane as being one of the more progressive individuals. Now, why have we seen her fall back over the past couple of months? I'm not exactly sure who's running her campaign or the strategy of her campaign, but if I had to speculate, I feel like they wanted to go into a situation where they were going to moderate. She equivocated a bit on Medicare for All. She hasn't been releasing these types of progressive plans that we're seeing her earlier on in the process. And she's taken a step back in the polls as a result. And I think that these campaign strategists for Warren were maybe thinking, well, if we start going towards that centrist lane, maybe we can pick off more support from individuals like a Pete Buttigieg or a Joe Biden or some of these other establishment-friendly Democrats. And maybe that will be more achievable than trying to continue to siphon off the progressive support from Bernie Sanders, because specifically with Sanders, he has the most committed supporters. So maybe they felt like that was going to be a tough path for them to continue to climb. Well, that has backfired, and the path that they have decided to go down, Elizabeth Warren has been consistently receding and quite a bit in these national polls, and I'm not sure what they're going to do to try to correct course. It's going to be really interesting. I think they might go down the path of trying to be anti-corruption, but at the end of the day, even though her campaign is going down a path where they aren't taking that big donor money like we're seeing from the Buttigieg campaign and the Biden campaign, it might backfire on Warren at the end of the day, because those individuals can just point out the fact that she transferred money from her Senate campaign over to her presidential campaign, and with her Senate campaign, she was taking that big donor money like we're seeing Buttigieg and Biden do throughout this process. So I think it was a big mistake for Elizabeth Warren to stop being a bold progressive, and she's paying the price as a result. This is going to be a primary that's studied for a number of years, given how many people were running and how the shifting around has occurred in the numbers. But I feel like specifically with Warren, she's been making some mistakes in recent months, and maybe she can regain it over the next month or so if she continues to align herself back in that progressive mindset and maybe release more of these progressive priorities and try to emphasize them a bit. But I think the damage might be done with Warren, and it could, at the end of the day, be a situation where the fact that these individuals that are polling behind Biden and Sanders don't have as much committed support as those top two candidates, making it all that much more difficult for them to try to close that gap. So now I want to go through and talk about the age demographics and the racial demographics and how that vote is playing out. And it's pretty much consistent what we are seeing state by state, as well as the national numbers overall, where Sanders is leading among voters under the age of 50. And this one, he's at 36%. And perhaps the reason why Biden's showing a little bit more strength in this poll is the fact that with that younger age demographic, he's not getting crushed, where he's in second place here at 22%. Warren's at 12%, and Yang is at 10 percentage point with those younger voters. And then those voters over the age of 50, Biden is absolutely cleaning up, where he has 45% of that support, followed by Warren at 14, and then Sanders and Buttigieg are each at 10 percentage points. And my opinion on this, and I don't think it's all that controversial, the fact that voters under the age of 50, they largely are going to get more of their news, info, media, and opinions from an online perspective. Probably more the reason why they go towards Sanders, where he tends to get a lot more positive coverage in the online sphere, as opposed to voters over the age of 50. They're not as engaged online. They get most of their news information from outlets like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and just traditional mainstream television, media, or newspapers. So in that situation, those outlets aren't as favorable towards Sanders, and they don't even mention him as much as what his polling numbers would indicate they should be talking about him. So those are voters that are going to be more comfortable going with somebody like a Biden, for instance, who's getting more coverage and maybe more of a rosy picture painted in the mainstream media than what we're seeing in the online sphere. And then also with the racial demographics, this is something that we are also consistently seeing, where Sanders is doing really well with the Latino vote. He's leading it at 36%, followed by Biden at 27%, Yang at 12%. And then the African-American vote continues to be very strong for Biden, who is at 52% with that group, followed by Sanders at 19%, Warren at 7%, Booker at 6%. And then the white vote tends to be pretty split up among these upper tier hopefuls, where you have Biden leading the way at 24%, Sanders at 22%, Warren at 17%, and Buttigieg at 15%. And now just to take a look at the commitment behind these different candidates, and something that's going to make it tough for Sanders to recede in the polls is the fact that he has the most committed supporters, and we essentially see that in every poll. So in this one, it's saying 71% of Sanders supporters are definitely going to vote for him, head and shoulders above the rest of the field. Biden is the closest to Sanders there at 57% of his voters going behind Biden. And I was kind of discussing this when I was talking about Elizabeth Warren. The fact that if she continued to stay in that progressive lane, it was going to be tough to try to continue to pull over Sanders voters, whereas Biden's at 57% committed and Buttigieg is at 29% committed. So maybe her campaign was thinking that they could pull off more of those centrist voters that were behind Biden and Buttigieg. It makes sense on the surface, but for whatever reason, it has definitely been backfiring for Warren. And then also with Warren, she's at 28% of her voters being committed to her. And if we have Biden and Sanders doing really well in these early states and kind of separating themselves from the pack, the fact that these other individuals don't have as much committed support, again, could turn this into a 1v1 scenario between Biden and Sanders as we work our way through primary season. We'll see if that ends up being the case or not. Also, these national Emerson polls have been a little bit more bullish towards Trump than where we've seen in other national polling outlets and results. In the prior result, Trump was doing a little bit better in his head-to-head matchups against these upper-tier Democratic hopefuls, where in this one, Biden and Sanders are showing the most strength, leading Trump by 4 percentage points each, 52-48. Warren also with a slim lead here over Donald Trump, 51-49. And when we scroll down and take a look, the makeup of men and women, it's actually quite a stark difference here. So to go over this final graphic that I want to touch on in this video, where with men, Trump is doing very well. The only one who makes it relatively competitive is Bernie Sanders, who's losing to Trump with men by 8%, but Biden is losing by 12%, Warren's losing by 16%, and Buttigieg is losing by 12% among male voters. Now with women voters, all of the Democratic hopefuls are doing very well. Buttigieg not quite as well as the rest of the pack, where he's leading by 10%. And then we see Biden leading by 18%, Sanders leading by 16%, and Warren also leading by 18 percentage points. And the pathway to victory for the Democrats in 2020 is getting that female vote to turn out. Now, there's a larger electorate of women voters, which helps the Democratic Party. And they just have to minimize their losses among male voters, and that can lead them to enough electoral success where they can go on and win the presidency. So, for these Democratic candidates, focusing on women's issues definitely is something that's going to be a benefit and play positively towards them, likely. And that was a big contributor to the Democrats actually winning the House of Representatives in 2018, was by turning out and doing really well among that women vote, kind of taking the momentum of the Women's March and the anti-Trump stance that a lot of women have, and they rolled that into success into 2018, and they're going to try to continue to do that as we go towards 2020. So those are the numbers that I wanted to touch on here, and if you'd like to take a look at all of the data for yourself, I'll link it down at the bottom of the video description. So I appreciate you guys stopping by. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, and I hope to see you guys back here for my next video.